And we're off. Hi, everyone. We're back as promised. Friday, August 15th, 2025. The complete recap of the second joint practice for the Dolphins against the Detroit Lions. More than that, just an overview where things stand after those two joint practices, heading into the second preseason game of the summer, Saturday afternoon against the Detroit Lions. This is the All Dolphins Podcast, episode 540. Hi. Missed you guys back in South Florida. Flew back home after the second of the two joint practices. And yes, you notice I am without the Expos hat. I don't know. Thought I'd try to change up a little bit. So before we start, as always, please like, subscribe, share, comment, all that good stuff. When you comment, please keep it respectful, even when you disagree. And I encourage you to disagree. Love the disagreements and make your case. Just don't say you're wrong. Make your case. Also, please check out the written content at Miami Dolphins On SI.com, where all the content is free, and there's usually a lot of it, and some of it's actually pretty good. I like to think so anyway. So anyway, let's go on to what I saw in Detroit. And again, for the record, and this is no shot at anybody, generally try to get your opinions for guys who actually were at the joint practice as opposed to what they heard, what they were told, and all that. And I will preface it with it's something that I did not see for myself. I will let you know as I go through my joint practice recap. There were four of us, Dolphins writers in Detroit at the, I forget the name, Reimer Performance Center. I should know this, but I didn't jot it down because unfortunately I didn't. Anyway, it was David Furones from the South Florida Sun Sentinel, Tom D'Angelo for the Palm Beach Post, Isaiah Smalls for the Miami Herald. And then also I worked collaboratively with John Macaroon of Detroit Lions On SI, the publisher, who you should know well. He was a guest on the show on Tuesday, I want to say before the joint practices. And some of his comments didn't play well with Dolphin fans who felt he was too much of a Detroit homer, gave this team too much credit and not enough to the Dolphins, including but not limited to saying that Jameson Williams would smoke Tyreek Hill in a race if they ever did that on the football field. Still not sure about that, but I will say Jameson Williams is really, really fast. And as I put out on the social media, he also got a mouth on him. Like, oh my Lord. He's really, really fast, and he's got good size for a guy that fast. And he can make some nice catches, but it would be nice if the dude can make a catch without looking at the DB and starting to chirp. But that didn't happen. And he got into it with former Lions and new Dolphin safety Fatu Melifonwu at the end of the joint practice, sometime during the joint practice on Wednesday. And Melifonwu spoke to the Dolphin writers after practice on Thursday, indicated that he's got no problem. That yes, Williams talks a lot, but he has no issue with that. The issue is if Williams is going to put his hands on me, I'm going to respond. And so that was his version. There was another skirmish on Thursday that one involved Lions offensive tackle Dan Skipper, all 6'9", 320, 30 pounds of him, who, talking to Lions people, tends to like stirring the pot. Got some agitator in him. And apparently what happened is, and I was watching the Dolphins defense on Thursday after watching the Dolphins offense on Wednesday, and there was at the end of the running play where he wound up on top of KJ Britt. And let's say, putting it delicately, he kind of made himself comfortable on top of KJ Britt before slowly getting up. Where there's a term for it, I don't really feel like using it, but you catch the drift, you'll know what I'm talking about. And that obviously did not please KJ Britt. And then things got haywire for a little bit. Didn't last terribly long. And then there was an issue on the other side that I did not personally witness, but was told about, where Patrick Paul put veteran defensive back Rock Ya-Sin on the ground, and then Rock Ya-Sin got up throwing a punch, and Patrick Paul kind of just like laughed it off and walked back to the huddle. So those were pretty much the only skirmishes on Thursday, and the overall take on Thursday, it was a much better showing for the Dolphin offense, both from the little I could see and also from all the reports I got. David Furones and I were focused on the Dolphin offense, pardon me, on Dolphins defense on Thursday. Isaiah and Tom were focused on the Dolphin offense, and by their account, by John Macaroon's account, the Dolphins offense, which much more productive on Thursday than Wednesday, which quite frankly was not a high bar because it was brutal on Wednesday. And the issue on Wednesday was basically not a whole lot of movement was created in the running game. Couple of runs to the outside, gained some decent yardage, nothing up the middle pretty much. The receivers were having a bear of a time getting open. That wasn't just in the 11-on-11. It was also in 7-on-7 in the 1-on-1 periods, and it was bad. And there were a lot of drop passes. I counted about 4 of them. And by drop passes, I included like stuff that wasn't necessarily directly in the receiver's hands, but like catches where maybe they had to go low to the ground, but the catches that really should be made if you're going to be on an NFL 53-man roster. And then the others, there were 2 interceptions, both by Zach Wilson when he forced throws into coverage. And as somebody, I think, asked me in the live podcast on Wednesday night that I did, how much of it was on Tua, really practically none of it, because he just had receivers when getting open, which was a big issue. And he was hurt by the drops as well. Well, on Thursday, again, I was able to watch the absolutely great catch, and it's the Dolphins put up on their social media account, the great catch by D. Eskridge in the corner of the end zone. I don't recall if it was a 7-on-7 or 11-on-11 team period or red zone. I think it may have been a red zone period, but I don't know if it was 7-on-7 or 11-on-11. But that was a great catch, and it was against former Jets starter DJ Reed, the cornerback who you may recall getting abused by Jalen Waddle in a game in December of 2023, the game where Tyreek Hill sat out because of an injury, and the Dolphins wound up winning 30-0. And that was also the famous play where Mike McDaniel mic'd up for Hard Knocks in season, if you recall, predicted, here we go, 1-play drive, and the Dolphins had the ball at the 40-yard line. Boom, 1-play, 60-yard touchdown. Jalen Waddle passed over and through DJ Reed for the touchdown. On that play, DJ Reed had great coverage against D. Eskridge, and Eskridge basically jumped and snatched the ball away from him. I mean, and here's the thing. I was thinking about that a little bit earlier today. It was like, I can't recall the last time a Dolphin player made that kind of a contested catch. And check it out, again, on the Dolphin social media account. You tell me the last time a Dolphins receiver made that kind of catch in a game, preseason or regular season. I mean, it was, whoa. And D. Eskridge was one of the guys who had a really rough outing on Wednesday, so that was good to see. And it was one of many touchdowns by the offense from Tua, from Zach Wilson. I didn't hear anything about Quinn Ewers throwing a touchdown pass, but if it was the same as it was on Wednesday, I can tell you that Ewers didn't get that many shots on offense. It was a whole lot of Tua and a little bit of Zach Wilson. And there were a lot of touchdown passes. I know Jalen Waddle had a couple of them. One of them was a little bit worrisome at first because he got up kind of limping a little bit, then holding his back, went back into action, caught a couple more touchdown passes. Eric Ezukama also had a couple of touchdown passes, receptions, I should say. Who else? I think Malik Washington may have a touchdown as well. So there were a lot of touchdowns compared to the day before, where I counted one clear touchdown was Tariq Black in the corner of the end zone, and there was the would-be touchdown, possible touchdown on a swing pass to Jalen Waddle, where the officials ruled them down at about the 5-yard line because the cornerback Robertson was in his vicinity and maybe would have tackled him, maybe he wouldn't have. But regardless, bottom line is much better outing by the offense on Thursday than on Wednesday. Don't recall anybody saying anything about a turnover by the offense after the 2 on Wednesday. Now, having said all that, this is why I want to take a pause here to talk about this whole notion of responding, matching the Lions' physicality. I mean, there wasn't an issue of physicality against the Lions on Wednesday for the offense. Their execution was just brutal. There was an issue of physicality, if you want to go there, on last Friday against the Bears, when the Bears decided they were going to play very, very physical with their defense and tackle guys, whereas the Dolphins defense was going to play by the rules of engagement, which was thudding, which basically standing up an offensive player to signify that you would have tackled him if it was a game setting, but not actually tackling him, where the Bears were like, no, we're going to hit you. Against the Lions, I didn't see any of that for the Dolphin offense on Wednesday, where the Lions were over the top physical. The most egregious thing might have been the one play where the linebacker with the mouth, Grant Stewart, or I should say the one with the comments that stirred up a lot of stuff, tried to stand up and throw to the ground Ollie Gordon at the end of a run, and Ollie Gordon was having none of it. He was standing his ground, and eventually they were broken up. But I didn't see anything of physicality. And then on Thursday, well, the Dolphins brought up the physicality level because their offense was much better. No, their offense just produced a lot better. And from what I can tell, also the pass protection was better on Thursday and was on Wednesday, when there were a couple of occasions where there was quick pressure. On the other side of the ball, again, I wasn't watching per se the defense on Wednesday. I could hear a hell of a lot of cheering coming from the stands, which were filled with Lions fans, although I did see a couple of Dolphin jerseys, including a Tua jersey. Saw a couple of other jerseys, Dolphin jersey, but it was mostly Lions fans, and there was a whole lot of cheering there. And you saw the highlights of Amon-Ra St. Brown having a field day, mostly against Jack Jones Jr., as he had to play against Jason Marshall Jr. in the end zone as well. And also a couple of times when I was looking over, it seemed like the Lions were having a productive play offensively. Well, on Thursday, it's kind of more of the same, unfortunately. And again, not an issue that they overpowered. They were more physical than the Dolphin. They're just a very, very, very good offense. I mean, you look at that team offensively, forget Jared Goff, whatever you want to say about him, though he does. And it's the same with the Dolphins, though. But it's operating with the first-team offense. That first-team offense with Jared Goff is like a hell of a lot different than when it's their backup Kyle Allen who comes in. And Kyle Allen is not great. And then Hendon Hooker, their former second-round pick from Tennessee, also not great. Had one play where he rolled out to his right in the red zone period, had somebody wide open in the back of the end zone and overshot him by a good 2 yards. But that first-team offense gave the Dolphins a hard time. On the run, a couple of runs broke for long gains. It's a practice. They're not tackling to the ground. How long would they have been? I don't know. More often than not, it was to the outside. More often than not, it was on the right side behind, of course, Penei Sewell, the all-pro right tackle for the Lions. And then the Dolphin pass rush, that was kind of disappointing. Nowhere to be found. There was one sack in the practice ending 2-minute session or game situation where each team's given the ball. I think it was about the 40-yard line, down 4, 1 minute left. Go for it. Dolphin offense down in that particular period, 4 and out actually, because it was 4 downs, and not good. Nobody open, check down, short throw away because nobody's open. 2 or 3 behind Eskridge, and on 4th down, threw down the middle to Tyreek Black, and nice pass break up by the safety Brian Branch. The Dolphins also stopped the Lions offense in that sequence, which may have been the highlight of the practice on defense. It included pretty early on a sack. It looked to me like it was Matthew Butler who got to him first. A couple of the other writers were saying, because now at that point everybody's watching because the action's going on only on one field. A lot of the guys were saying it was Minka who got there first. To me, it looked like Matthew Butler, Minka, whatever. Outside of that, though, very, very little pressure on Jared Goff. There were a couple of times in the red zone period where he had to check down because he couldn't find anybody open, but nobody was getting to him. And that included whether it was Bradley Chubb, the big dudes up the middle, not including Zach Sealer, because it's the part I probably should mention the injury status. Zach Sealer did not take part in practice on Thursday. He was out there. He was wearing a baseball hat. Not going to speculate. I think the fact that he was out there certainly would lead you to believe that it's nothing of significance. The other one who was out there, who was not out there, who normally would have been expected to be out there because there was no previous injury that we knew of, that's running back Devon Achane. He was not out there, period. So don't know what's going on with him. Logically, Mike McDaniel is going to be asked about his status after the game on Saturday, which kicks off, by the way, at 1 p.m. Eastern time from Ford Field. So without Zach Sealer, nobody else was getting pressure. Chop Robinson, by the way, immediately back the next day after sustaining what Mike McDaniel told us was they got hit in the ribs, and the Dolphins wanted to make sure it wasn't fractured or anything like that, which is why they got him off the field to examine him. He was out there lined up against Penei Sewell a couple of times. Really, really no pressure. There were a couple of decent plays against the run. Jordan Phillips is one guy who caught my attention and is somebody who I've mentioned before. If you've been watching the podcast on a regular basis, I haven't felt him very much throughout training camp, but this is a guy who's really, really coming on. I'm going to say this about him. He's coming on, which is very, very encouraging. Had a couple of good plays. Jordan Brooks also looked good. Very active. Clearly the stud in the linebacker core. We talk about the Dolphins having a very deep linebacker core with Brooks, Tyrell Dotson, KJ Britt, and Willie Gay Jr., but it's clearly Jordan Brooks is, the dude in that group. And it's not close. And then in the secondary, another guy I want to say is kind of making some headway, and I want you to keep an eye on him. That's Ethan Bonner. Playing really, really well lately. If he were to overtake Kendall, because the two guys, who started against or listed first on the depth chart are Kendall Sheffield and Storm Duck. If you were to tell me right now that Ethan Bonner is going to overtake Kendall Sheffield, I would tell you right now I could see that. And Kendall Sheffield is a dependable veteran, but there's a lack of speed there. And this is interesting too, because when he spoke to the reporters after one of the practices, either the solo practice, I think he spoke after the joint practice with the Bears. He was talking about me at one point. He was clocked at 4.26. I'm sorry, I've been watching him all summer, and I don't see 4.26 or anywhere near there. And every time I've seen him tested deep, what I notice is a lack of speed. And if you saw the highlight play or the low light play, depending on how you want to look at it, from the Dolphins standpoint, if the Eskridge touchdown reception from Tua was the highlight for the Dolphins, the play of practice for the Dolphins on Thursday, well, the play of practice for the Lions was a 50-yard touchdown pass from Jared Goff to Jamison Williams, who sprinted past Sheffield at the line. And then Ife Melifonwu was late to come over. And if you look at the clip from the Detroit Lions social media account, and I pointed this out, I was disturbed by the way Melifonwu is running, trying to catch up at the end of the play, even though he wasn't going to get there. It was a lost cause. If Goff and Williams were going to connect, that's touchdown regardless. Still would have liked an all-out effort, even in a lost cause. That was very disturbing to me when I saw that. But the Dolphins had their problems with Jamison Williams. They had their problems with Amon-Ra St. Brown, and it wasn't strictly Jack Jones Jr. on this day. It was everybody. The dude is he's good. He's just really, really good. There was a play in a red zone period where he ran it was David Montgomery. I'm sorry, where he ran a quick out pattern and it looked, and Jordan Brooks swung his arm in frustration after the play, and I couldn't tell whether he got picked off or there was a breakdown in the defensive coverage where somebody else should have been next to Montgomery, but it's a very pitch and catch. And there were a lot of those in that red zone drill. It was touchdown pass after touchdown pass after touchdown pass after touchdown pass. Didn't matter who was two. And I'm looking here. Back-to-back touchdown passes to St. Brown and a 7-on-7, one against Jason Marshall Jr., one against Kendall Sheffield. It was rough. Again, I'm going to say this, that Lions offense is no joke. And sure, you can say the Dolphins were without Zach Sealer and Jalen Phillips, but we got to stop with pointing out all the players the Dolphins are missing, because they need to be more competitive regardless of who's out there. Just like, for example, on offense on Wednesday, as bad as they were, yes, they were without Austin Jackson, Alec Kingold, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle didn't get his normal number of reps. So, yeah, that obviously going to make a difference. But the performance has to be better. And on defense, again, to me, what I saw is basically what we kind of know. If the secondary is going to be a problem, as I've said, the cornerback play has not been egregious for most of training camp, but it's going to be a problem if there's no pressure on the quarterback. Dolphins certainly, it's clearly not good enough. And ESPN fantasy writer Mike Clay came out with his position by position NFL rankings on Friday morning at the Dolphin cornerbacks at 32. And if they're not 32, based on name recognition, they're not that much higher than that, if we're going to be honest about it. And the problem, again, like I said, I haven't seen anything egregious. I haven't seen bad breakdowns for most of training camp, but they can only be able to hold up so long in coverage. If there's no pass rush, the Dolphin defense is in trouble. And again, there's reason to be confident based on the track record of Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, and what Robinson showed last year. But it wasn't there against the Lions with Robinson and Chop on Thursday. And by all accounts, on Wednesday, the one sack the Dolphins had was by Kenneth Grant when he won a one-on-one battle with Tate Radledge, the Lions rookie guard, who Don Campbell, by the way, had high praise for before practice on Thursday. So it's interesting, too, because we saw the tweets from either Detroit or national writers. One guy commented he'd never seen such a lopsided joint practice ever. I've seen joint practices. I think the first one I recall seeing might have been Carolina 2015. And again, I did not eyeball both sides. I can tell you that the Dolphins' performance against the Lions defense on Wednesday was brutal. Not sure it was much worse than what we saw last Friday against Chicago. I'm going to be honest about it, because the one against Chicago also included, along with the three Tua Tagovailoa interceptions, a lot of flags on offense. The one on Thursday, the one on Wednesday that was really poor was mostly about receivers not getting separation, running game going nowhere, and drop passes, but I don't recall seeing a lot of flags. So there was that. So those two almost were on the par. Now, if we add the defensive part of it, the Dolphin defense got beaten pretty solid by the Lions on both days. So is this a case where we need to temper expectations for the Dolphins defense? Again, we're still in August. I think we may want to. Yes and no. Based on what we saw there, yeah, the Dolphin defense, and this is the same thing with every part of this team. This is a team that does have good potential. There's just an awful lot of question marks. And if all those question marks, and most of them produce positive results, Dolphins could have a good season. But there's a lot of ifs. Don't know what else there is to say about the joint practice. Mike McDaniel did indicate prior to practice on Thursday that at that time he was not planning on playing any of the starters against the Lions in the preseason game. I don't see what would have happened to make him change his mind. So I'm going to guess Zach Wilson's going to start at quarterback. And then the guys you're not going to see, I'm curious to see whether Jonas Avainaya plays, even though he is a starter, but he is a rookie. Do the Dolphins consider Larry Borom a starter in this particular instance, or does he play there? Again, if you go back to the preseason opener against the Bears, James Daniels and Aaron Brewer played the first series and they were out. Patrick Paul played one more series and then he was out. So is it a case that only Brewer and Daniels are considered quote unquote like starters and the other guys are younger players who still need to work? Not sure there. Same thing on defense with Kenneth Grant. The Dolphins are going to go ahead and play him. Technically, he didn't start against the Bears because the Dolphins had two interior defensive linemen, Jones and Sealer, to go along with Robinson and Chubb, the two inside linebackers, and then 5 DBs. So I certainly would not expect Chubb, Jordan Brooks, Sealer, Minkah Fitzpatrick, James Daniels, Aaron Brewer, Tua, Tyreek obviously dealing with the oblique, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane. As far as the injuries in terms of an update, Mike McDaniel had told us before practice Wednesday that Tyreek was going to try to do some things, wound up not doing anything. And then McDaniel said basically it was based on the conversation with a trainer I guess early in the practice or after stretching, and Tyreek gave him an answer, and the trainers were like, yeah, no, that's good. You can, and as McDaniel said, and it makes perfect sense. It's an oblique injury. You go back out there before it's fully healed. You take the chance of making it a much longer recovery period. There's zero need for the Dolphins to do that. It's not like Tua and Tyreek don't have chemistry on the field and the timing down after all their years of reps together. So there's zero point that being done. Obviously, going to be very curious to see what's going on with Zach Sealer and with Devon Achane. Jalen Phillips also, again, continues to miss time. I did see him, by the way, running on one of the fields at practice on Thursday while the action was taking part on the other field, because at times they were doing kickoff returns for each team, and that was going on only on one field. So during one of those periods, Jalen Phillips was running up and down the field. So we'll see what's going on as far as that is concerned. In case you missed it, the Dolphins made a roster move yesterday. They put tackle Jermaine Ifedi on injured reserve. Mike McDaniel told us it was a torn triceps tendon. That was the reason. To take his place, the Dolphins signed Yadni Kajust, who's got some game experience from New England Patriots, however, hasn't played in an NFL regular season game since 2022. Can he make the roster? Maybe, if he flashes very, very early and very much. But it may be that it's just for training camp purposes. And then I do want to mention the last thing, which is very interesting note to me. We chronicled this on Miami Dolphins on SI.com. The story involving Matt Breida, remember the running back the Dolphins acquired in a trade from the San Francisco 49ers 2022 draft, I want to say, for a 5th-round pick, played a year for the Dolphins. Well, it turns out the Dolphins actually invited him for the tryout on that day, where they worked out 4 running backs, wound up signing 2, Mike Boone and Aaron Shamklin. But Breida said, no, thanks, I'm going to retire instead. So certainly interesting. And of course, as part of that story as well, the Dolphins did work out Royce Freeman and Jamal Williams on that day. And as Josh Moser of the WSVN, the sportscaster, who does a weekly segment with Drew Rosenhaus, who is Jamal Williams' agent, Moser said in a spot on DolphinsTalk.com that Williams wanted too much money for the Dolphins' liking. That's why they didn't sign it. So take that for what it's worth. That's going to wrap it up for now. Scheduling note, live All Dolphins podcast post-game recap of the preseason game against the Detroit Lions will be at 5 p.m. on Saturday. Dolphins Collective on Friday night at 7:30 p.m. with Doug Lee Durante Defense Talk, Omar Kelly, and myself. More importantly, check out the website, please, Miami Dolphins on SI.com. All the content is free as always. And hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like, subscribe, share, comment, all that good stuff. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend.